So you should have two sides of this for transformations. We're looking at a 90-degree rotation about the origin. So again, make sure that your screen or your paper is flipped to the side that says 90-degree rotation, not 180. So the first thing about a rotation is another way that we refer to this as a turn. So we're basically turning our shape. We turn them in degrees of 90. So a 90-degree turn is one turn. A 180-degree turn is two turns. 270 would be three turns. And 360 would be four turns, basically getting you back to the start. So again, it goes in increments of 90. So 90, 180, 270, 260. So we're going to start with a 90 degrees clockwise or counterclockwise. Well, if we think about this, these are two different directions, right? If you think about a clock, you've got 12, 3, 6, 9, right? So clockwise would start at the top and rotate around and back up. So depending on where you're at, you're going to kind of be going down and then back around. So that's going to be clockwise. So counterclockwise would be the opposite. So again, you still kind of think about the clock, but instead of going down and following the numbers in order, you're going to go backwards and kind of work your way from the top back down and around. So that's going to be your counter clockwise. So that does make a big difference in which direction you're going to go. So you pretty much have two different things to look at when you when you rotate. The first one, 90 degrees, you're going to switch your X and your Y. These are actually the same rules for a 270-degree turn, but not super important. So determine whether each X and Y is negative or positive, and that depends on which quadrant you go to. So if you look down here, there's a couple of examples in there, but it makes a little more sense if you look right here. So if we start in quadrant 1, one turn would be moving to the quadrant 4. So your new signs would be a positive X and a negative Y. A counterclockwise turn would be moving in the opposite direction. So again, counter and clockwise. So depending on which way you move, it will never end up kitty corner to where you started. That would be 180 degrees. And by kitty corner, they basically mean right across from one another. So again, if you start in quadrant 1, 190-degree turn clockwise would put you down here in quadrant 4. Quadrant 1 counterclockwise would put you in quadrant 2. So you're never going to end up in quadrant 3 by doing one turn. So if we go ahead and look at this, we're going to look at A, B, and C. So we're going to do 90 degrees counterclockwise. Well, the first thing we need to do is flip X and Y. So if we notice, we'll write this here, A, the original A, notice how it doesn't have a prime. A is going to be at, let me zoom in just a little bit. There we go. So A is going to be at -6. Notice how it's right there, kind of lined up with A. And it's going to line up with a +7. So first thing we do is flip those. So for A prime, instead of going 6, 7, it's going to go 7 and then 6. So counterclockwise, the main thing you got to figure out is, will you move to this quadrant? Notice how it is one turn to the left, or well, sorry, that's one to the right, or this way. So counterclockwise, well, if this is the start, clockwise would go this way, down and around. So counterclockwise, we're going to move down to this quadrant. So if we look, this quadrant lines up with quadrant number 3. So that just means that both of my signs will be negative. So A prime should be located at -7, negative 6. So B, original B, is going to be located at negative 4, positive 3. So the first thing we're going to do is flip those. So instead of 4, 3, it's 3, 4. And we're still in that third quadrant, which means they both just become negatives. So to plot the point B prime, we go over to negative 3 and down to negative 4. And original C is going to be at negative 6 up to positive 3. So again, we got to flip them first, so that becomes a 3 and then a 6. And still quadrant 3, so they should both be negative. So C prime should end up at a negative 3 and a negative 6. So we plot that at negative 3, negative 6. So if you notice what's happened, this is different from a reflection. It's not the same image, just on this side kind of backwards. We've actually rotated it. So kind of if you think about turning your paper, so I'm going to turn it clockwise. Notice how this shape was actually the same. So that's where that turn concept comes from. So now we're going to do the same points, A, B, and C, except for we're going to go clockwise. So instead of starting at the top and going the opposite way down my clock, I'm actually going to start at the top and go to the right side. So I'm going to end up in this quadrant. So notice how going from here over. So that's going to leave me in the plus, plus, or positive, positive. So we still change. So these are original, so we can go back. So we changed X and Y, and they just stay positive. So pretty easy there. B, all that's going to happen is I'm going to change X and Y, and they're going to stay positive because, again, they're in that first quadrant, so it shows positive, positive. And then the last one, this one, 6, 3, so we're going to flip those for 3, 6. And again, it's just going to stay positive. So now we're going to go and graph those. So we got 7, 6, A prime, 3, 4, B prime, and 3, 6. No, 3, 6. Yep, 3, 6, my bad. Should be C prime. So we end up with the same right triangle, just in our new quadrant. So again, notice how it's being reflected. So notice the shape. Notice what happens to our original if I rotate this. Boom, it turns out to be the exact same shape we had over here. I just flipped it. So again, one more example. So this is going to be 90 degrees clockwise. So a clock starts at the top and works its way down and around. So the next 90-degree turn should put me into this quadrant right here. So quadrant number 2 is going to have a negative X and a positive Y. So let's go ahead and get our original points. So A was located at negative 6, negative 2. B was negative 5, negative 5. C was negative 1, negative 7. And D should have been negative 1, negative 3. So 90-degree turns, we flip X and Y. So it was a 6 and then a 2. It's now a 2, then a 6. So again, we're in quadrant 1. So quadrant 1 shows negative X values. So we're just going to make our X's negative. Y's are going to stay positive. B, we're going to flip, which in this case doesn't really flip that many because 5 and 5 can only switch with 5 and 5. But again, this quadrant, your X's are negative. So that first 5 is going to stay negative. Flipping 1 and 7, so it should become a 7 and then a 1. And again, that quadrant X is negative, so it stays negative. And last one should be flipping, so 3 then 1. And X is negative. So let's see what that looks like when we graph it out. So we have a negative 2 and a positive 6. Should be A prime. B prime should be a negative 5 and a positive 5. C prime should be a negative 7 and a positive 1. And D prime should be a negative 3 and 1. So if you notice, we have the exact same shape. It's just kind of rotated a little bit. So instead of A and B being on the side, we've rotated it up to the top. So again, it's kind of like you're turning your figures. I'm going to go ahead and move to the back. We're going to skip that one. But that would actually go into that quadrant. So 180-degree turn is on the back, and all you do for a 180-degree turn is simply change the signs of both X and Y values. So for example, negative 3, 5 becomes a positive 3 and a negative 5. A positive 6 and then a negative 7 just becomes a negative 6 positive. So all a 180-degree turn is moving it once, twice, that would be clockwise, or once, twice, that would be counterclockwise. So again, look right here, the points before, if they're negative, negative, they turn positive, positive. If it's a positive and a negative, then it should be a negative and a positive. So we'll do a couple examples to see what that looks like. There's no counterclockwise or clockwise. So let's look at A, B, and C. So A is going to be at 5, 5. B is going to be at 7, 1. And C is going to be at 3, 1. So there's no flipping back and forth. They stay the same. But these are all positive, positive. So they need to change negative, negative. So A prime should be at a negative 5, negative 5. B prime should be at a negative 7, negative 1. And C prime should be at a negative 3, negative 1. So all I'm going to do is graph those. So a negative 5 and a negative 5. A prime. Negative 7, negative 1. Should be B prime. And C prime should be a negative 3, negative 1. So your figure kind of turned here and here. So it's kind of upside down on itself. So let's do the same thing with X, Y, and Z. So X, Y, and Z, the originals. So X is going to be at negative 7, positive 3. Y is going to be at negative 7, positive 7. And Z is going to be at negative 3, positive 7. So this is a negative number and then a positive. So we're looking up here at a negative and a positive before. So this should become positive and then negative. So we still keep 7, 3. 7 stays positive, 3 turns negative. Oh, wrong negative. Negative 7, positive 7, still says 7, 7. First one's now positive and the second one is now negative. And then negative 3, 7 stays a 3 and a 7. But the Y is going to change to a negative. So when we graph that, we're at a positive 7 and then a negative 3. Y is going to be at a positive 7 and then a negative 7. Nope, that's not negative 7. Oops, that's Y. Whoopsies. And Z is going to be at a negative 3. Sorry, positive 3, negative 7. So we can start to see that that's still a right triangle, just like X, Y, and Z. However, it does rotate on itself. Go ahead and try 15 and just 15, no 16. So only try 15. 16 is a lot of points, but you can try it if you want to. You have 2 Khan Academies to do on rotating. So go ahead and try those. All it is matching up the shape. So how many turns would happen if it says 90 degrees counterclockwise, 90 degrees clockwise, 270 clockwise, which is again 2 turns. So go ahead and make sure that you finish your notes. Make sure that you take a picture and submit it on Canvas, and then do your Khan Academies.